Welcome back to Take Two, presented by LeftRightPolitics.com, a discussion of the times and current events. I'm joined as always by Adam Matlack and Mike Pomerantz. Today, I'd like to know, is the conversation around white privilege helping or hurting the Black Lives Matter movement?
So it's an interesting situation we have. I mean, the conversation around race in this country has, um, it's been a conversation since its founding. I mean, to be honest, the country took voices from people for years, hundreds of years, um, gave voices to people who, based off of their color of their skin or their monetary value, um, this is all true. It happened. We've seen the conversation around reparations been brought up by the BET founder. Um, $14 trillion. Ooh, great. It's an interesting situation because there's this thing called white guilt, and I think there's a lot of people I know who they're like, well, if you don't accept your privilege, if you're not guilty of this, if you don't recognize it, if you don't check your privilege, well, then you're just as bad as these other people. You're just some sort of closet racist. And the problem with white privilege, and the answer to the question is no, it's not helping the situation. And the reason why is because it is not defined. It is not clear. It is uh, this. Guess what? It applies to you. You're white. You have it, regardless of your acceptance of it, understanding of what I'm claiming or not. You have it. You need to apologize for it, and you need to kneel for it, or whatever the crap is going on. Look, you want measured change. We talked about this stuff before. If you want something to improve, if you want people to be heard, if you want to, change people's hearts, the answer is to not talk about some boogeyman thing about how you live in a life where your music was on TV or your music was on the radio and you saw representations of the color of your skin on TV, and it's not other people went through and they were like, well, it's that I never saw that. It's not getting anybody anywhere. And so there's no way that I would ever agree that trying to bring that conversation is saying this massively undefined situation of, or undefined like charge, which is, oh, you're white, you have privilege. The reason why you didn't experience X, you didn't experience Y. It's convoluting this an already incredibly complicated situation, and it's definitely not helping the movement at all.
The perceived problem is that when I accuse someone of having taken advantage of white privilege, that they feel as if they have been attacked. And they also feel at times that African Americans, Black people have been given an advantage in terms of being able to claim their victimhood. And so, on the one hand, the discussion of white privilege says you can't understand, or you should try to understand, but you really can't, what it's like to walk through a neighborhood on your way home from a friend's house and think that you could arbitrarily not live long enough to get back to where you call home because a police officer will blow you away, mistaking you for another Black person. Okay. So it doesn't have to do as much, in my mind, with we didn't see you on TV, we didn't hear your music. It has to do with, can you get from point A to point B? Can you exercise your freedom as an American safely? And for many Black people, the answer is no. And it has been that way for centuries. So the problem is that it is interpreted as, you're blaming me for this. I never harmed a black person. Why are you making me responsible for this? And the answer is we are all responsible. We are all, listen, a great scene in a movie where they're trying to figure out if a guy is a robot. And they hook him up and they're going to look at his pupil and they ask him questions that are designed to elicit human reaction. And they talk about a turtle that got flipped over and is baking in the sun, painful, deadly. And the idea is to see if the robot has an emotional reaction to that troubling image. Empathy is humanity. Empathy makes us who we are. And you say, well, listen, kids today, they're not slaves. Why am I having to empathize with people who lived 400 years ago? And my answer is, it's not okay yet. It's not equal yet. And I say yet out of an abundance of optimism and hope. But to say that I don't want to hear about how other people have a problem because of the color of their skin is to deny your own humanity, is to deny empathy, which is the thing that will get us out of this mess. If somebody can say before they jump down your throat, before they try and dunk on you on social media, if somebody can say, let me think of what it would be like to be in that situation, then you transcend and you can start to eliminate white privilege.
So your mere like explanation of it shows just how bad of an idea it is to elicit that word. And because it's not taken, look in conversation, in interpersonal relationships, one of the most common things that happen for misunderstandings is misassociated definitions. I have a different definition for a word than you do, yet it's the same exact word. People do this all the time. They're like, oh, it's not that. And they say, yeah, it is that. And they have different definitions for that word. This is a classic situation of if you want to talk about how race affects people, they try to personalize it by saying, you don't understand because you have different experiences. They sit there and say, not they, I'm sorry, but people say that certain people, certain subgroups, in this case, white people, have a different life. They tell people say, oh, you can't understand a mile in my shoes because you've never walked it. Well, how do they know mine? It's an assumption of the fact that because you are white, you lived a certain way. There's 15 million people in this country who are white and more that are below the poverty line. About 8 million more than African Americans. This is a money issue at its heart beyond anything else, way beyond the color of your skin. The fact that we in this country have economically suppressed multitudes of cultures, not just black, not just Asian, not just white, but just basically across the board. Ultimately, if you are disenfranchised in a way that precludes you from being rich, you're not rich. You're not in a good situation. You don't have good parents. You don't have any money, and you get in trouble with the law. You're screwed. You're totally screwed. But if you have money, I don't care what color you are. I don't care. You're gonna end up a whole lot better than somebody who has no money. And so ultimately the race conversation of saying, oh well, you need to check it because you can't ever walk a mile in my shoes. I'm going to go ahead and assume what your life was like and already what because of your color of the skin. This is just two wrongs don't make a right. The idea of to sit there and assume, I'm not going to sit there and say that I understand how it is to be a person of color in this country. But I would hope that everybody would sit there and say, well, I don't know how it is to be you and what you've lived through and what you've understood or not lived through. Yet the assumption still stands. And here's the attack. It doesn't, if the goal of white privilege is to elicit an empathetic response, it doesn't even come close. It actually elicits a negative attack response. And so, yeah, it's not only is it's not helpful to movement because it doesn't do what it's supposed to achieve. It doesn't achieve the you've never walked a mile in my shoes. I wish you could understand this. And it's not because you're white. It's because you didn't grow up in my neighborhood. You're not from where I was. You didn't have the parents I had. You didn't have this. You didn't experience these things. You can make it about the fact that person's white. But I know people who are white, who grew up in crappy situations, who experienced those things. I didn't. I did live a privileged life, but it wasn't because I was white. It was because my parents worked their tail off for it, and all these other things. My grandma and grandpa came to this country with an 8th grade and 6th grade education, respectively. They had nothing. They had absolutely nothing. And people be like, oh, they were treated. He worked as a janitor for AT&T for 30 years. He was a janitor. It's not like there was some special thing here. He didn't get some special privilege. He was a janitor. And so the idea that I've gotten to a place and I am who I am because of the color of my skin, I can accept the idea that people believe that. But I can also state clearly and emphatically that you're judging me based off of the way that people shouldn't be judged. They should be judged as individuals and not as those who are of color of their skin.
Couple of things. First of all, you have a different take on this, or potentially different take on this, because I know you to not be thrilled about being around police. I know that you have a sense of the lack of your personal safety. In other words, safety's here when you're doing whatever you're doing, and then some police come around, it goes down, because you have that. So that's maybe a little more enlightenment. But don't take when I say white privilege, I'm not that I'm talking about a thing. It's a thing, okay? You can say, well, you can't insult me like that. Two wrongs don't make no. It's like a picture yourself at the grocery store. You're walking in the butcher's aisle and you get some ground beef. Okay? It's a thing. It's the ground beef. You say, well, that ground beef, you call it ground beef, it's got an agenda. There's no agenda. It's not an insult. It's a thing. And when you say that a white person and a black person, both growing up in poverty, are exactly the same, that's not true. You can say it's true, but for millions and millions of people over hundreds and hundreds of years, it's not true. And that is all the doctrine or the thing attempts to describe. You can deny it. You can say, well, no. There's no color. Never treated anybody different based on skin color. To me, that's denying reality. You get a conversation with people who are going to deny reality, you're not going to have a conversation very long. Picture the ground beef in the I must be getting near dinner. I'm hungry, whatever. But the point is that it's just a thing that exists. You can't say that it doesn't exist.
That's the response, though. The response. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about the response. The response that is elicited is that exact response.
Well, fuck that response.
Well, that's what it
when
is.
When I say here's the thing, I don't care what your response is. Your response doesn't change whether or not I'm going to tell you about the thing. The thing is what it is.
Is white privilege helping bring that to the table and using it? Is it helpful to the movement? No, because it doesn't elicit the proper response. It elicits the wrong response.
Okay. So here's what has to happen. After 400 years, we got to be nice to white people because we don't want to hurt their feelings when we're trying to get them to stop shooting black people. I get it now. Let's not hurt anybody's feelings. Let's not use any words when we're just describing a thing that might make the person hearing us give that description feel like, oh, I'm not a good person. Because I wouldn't want to make anybody feel like they're not a good person.
If you want to make a difference, if you want to change someone's mind, you don't do it in a way that attacks them. You were a trial lawyer, for God's sakes. You know this. You know this, that the way to somebody's heart is to not be like, you need to figure out yourself and you need to check yourself and all this crap. That's not how you do this. You need to actually elicit empathetic responses, not defensive ones. So there's no way I'm going to agree with the idea that trying to assault and be like, oh, I don't care about this. I don't care about how this makes you feel. I don't care about the implications of what this says.
White privilege is not an insult. People talk about my white privilege. I don't feel bad about that.
Neither do
It's
I.
a thing. It exists. And for people on the other side of this argument to say, oh, that hurts. You hurt me so bad. I say, sack up.
And as long as that's the conversation, as long as that's being elicited, you won't change any of those people's minds.
Look, we waited too long. Okay, here's how I tried cases, and here's how I approach this argument: facts, reality. And when I come across people who say, I can't take the facts, I can't take the reality, it's too painful, it makes me feel bad about myself, it's an insult, I don't know what to do, man. All I got are facts. And when I tried cases based on the facts.
Well, people in this country and around the globe mainly try cases based off how they feel. They're not concerned, they can barely discern what a fact is or isn't. And so the idea that if you want to make change and if you want to make it clear that police brutality is an all-time unacceptable level, it's not an all-time high. See, it's way less than what it used to be. It's actually gotten significantly better. But our tolerance for it has dramatically dropped because it's actually gone down year after year after year. Now, that's not part of the conversation. It doesn't even should be, because I'm shooting for the zero. I'm shooting for the zero cases of police brutality against all people. All right. And my point being, though, is if you want to get this point across, if you want to win allies in this supposed collective response, then division and divisive tools or communication is not the way to do it.
Who decides when a fact is divisive? If I state a fact and you're like, listen, man, that fact is kind of divisive. Well, what am I supposed to do now? Why don't you just take away all my arguments? Why don't you just take away my whole thing? Because I can't offend you. Let me tell you what I'll do. I'll make up a story about unicorns and rainbows, and that is how I'll get to you, because all you want to do is deal with fantasy. Because it's too hard to deal with facts.
Well, it's not me, but it is other people. But
right,
I make it very, very clear. You're not offended. I'm never offended. Literally never. Ever. Somebody came up and said, I've never uttered the words. I probably have, but I don't actually believe I've said the words, well, that offends me. And to someone who's, I don't care if somebody's idea offends me. It certainly doesn't offend me that people think that white privilege is real or white privilege is fake or that I have it or that I don't. I mean, I don't really care, to be honest. I'm trying to judge the situation as what can we make a difference in? And in terms of BLM, in terms of you could debate the same thing about Black Lives Matter. The statement alone elicits, oh, well, all lives matter. And people are like, oh, they freak out about that too. Look, even that is debatable, but in terms of what its response is, and when you're trying to, jar somebody loose, you're trying to make them move a position, attacking their existence because of their race and singling them out because of their race is not an effective way.
Whoa.
That's what they feel. That's what they feel like.
But wait, Adam, is that a reasonable response?
No, of course not.
How long are we going to tolerate unreasonable responses? How long are we going to coddle all these people who are like so friggin' fragile, goddamn snowflakes? How long?
The safe spaces are
safe spaces for Republicans, safe spaces for conservatives, safe spaces for racists.
It sure is not. The safe space is for the people who aren't allowed to have an idea or an opinion other than the tolerant left. That's what it was designed for. That's what the universities have it for.
But it's not
That's
a
period.
critique.
That's
It,
not.
it's just a thing.
Of course, it's a thing, but the point is how it's taken, and how it's taken matters. Look, this goes back to the larger point. People, they do things based off their gut, and if they, and I mean white people here, not just people, but I mean when I'm saying white people are in a position of you kind of need to choose. You need to choose is the idea, right? You need to choose. Do you support racism, or do you I don't know, whatever, you don't like, systematically or categorically reject it, right? And you need to do X, and you need to atone for the fact that you don't understand my position, and you need to try to listen and all these things. And actually, in many cases, that's a great idea, because the listening is one of the biggest reasons why and how people are talking about. When I'm talking about listening, I'm not talking about what you lived through. I'm talking about what I lived through. And when you want to, if you want to actually change someone's mind, you let them know what you lived through, not how they had it nice. That's not effective. That's not going to change a bunch of people's opinion. And you can say it's a bad thing and we don't need to tolerate that crap anymore. But the reality is that if you want to change someone's position, if you want to help them understand, it's not to attack. And I don't mean it's actually attack, but in their minds it is who they are as a person, or that they exist, or whatever. You should absolutely be talking about what you experienced, where you came from, and you should try to make sure they understand and they can figure it out that, oh, I've never experienced that. That's how you get somebody to agree with you, not by what they believe and what they take as an attack. I'll let you close.
The last thing I would say is that if there's a magic pill, if there's a silver bullet, listening might be it. That may be Pollyanna, it may be oversimplified, but I couldn't agree with you more on that point. Listening is vital, and it's been a pleasure to listen to some of the wrong-headed things you've had to say.
You know.
All right, that's all the time we have today. Thank you both for your thoughts. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to like and subscribe below, and we'd love to hear from you in the comments section. Thanks again. We hope you join us for the next edition of Take Two, presented by LeftRightPolitics.com.